Hi, I'm Julia. Welcome to my channel. It is now February, but I'm doing my January wrap-up because in January I read 22 books, which I thought was pretty momentous, and even though a lot of them were comics. But we're counting them now, so it's all good. I'm going to try and do a little mini review for everyone and go a little bit further in depth into the ones that I want to devote more time to. So the first book, you've heard of it, you've probably read it, you loved it, Sadie by Courtney Summers. This is not a genre that I usually pick up. It's a young adult thriller, but it has been getting a lot of press and I thought that would be something that I was interested in. So Sadie is about a young woman named Sadie, and she is looking for her younger sister's killer. She thinks that it is her mom's ex-boyfriend who abused her when she was growing up. And then it also follows the transcripts of a podcast by a man named Wes McCrae as he is trying to track down Sadie, and we find out that the events of the podcast happen about 3 months after the events in Sadie's POV, so we hear Sadie doing things from her point of view, and then Wes comes along a few months later and then kind of picks up more details that Sadie missed, and we kind of figure out what happened to the people that Sadie was talking to after she left. And it was just amazing. I think that one thing that really detracts from a lot of YA for me, especially contemporary YA, is a high school setting. I didn't have that great of a time in high school, and I don't think that many YA books portray high school in the way I experienced it. I just don't like being reminded of that time. But this is not a high school book because, you know, Sadie had to drop out to take care of her sister, and it was just phenomenal. As an older sister, it really hit home for me. This one was really hard to read, so trigger warning for sexual assault and child death, but it was really, really good. Next, I read The Imitation Game. This is a graphic novel by Jim Ottavani and Leland Purvis. The Imitation Game is about Alan Turing. It's kind of what the movie was based off of. It's a really intellectual graphic novel, probably one of the more difficult graphic novels I've read just because of the denseness of the subject matter. It's trying to be as accurate as possible to Alan Turing's life. He's one of my kind of special interest historical figures, up there with Ada Lovelace. And the two of them actually meet in this graphic novel when Alan is talking about AI and he's refuting Ada Lovelace's claim that computers could never think for themselves. And it's this kind of really cool moment that I have wanted to see since I learned that Alan Turing was an admirer of Ada Lovelace, so that was really cool to see. I think that it was a great jumping on point for learning more about Alan Turing. I have this hefty tome about him to read someday, so I'm gonna get there, but I thought it was a great introduction to him as a person, a lot different from the movie. It really delves into the queer aspects of his identity more, but that isn't his only character trait, so I really admired it for that. I think the art was pretty good. It played with the medium and justified its existence as a graphic novel, because I think that for something to be a good graphic novel, the fact that it is a graphic novel has to elevate the story, so the art and the layout of the pages all have to work towards the story and make it something more than just an ordinary novel, and I think this graphic novel succeeded. It just took me a little while to read, and I think I wasn't as engaged as I could have been. Next, I finished Code Girls by Liza Mundy. This was a book that I read in audio. It took me a while to read. While I was really interested, it just went into a lot of details, but it is about female code breakers in America during World War II. It followed a lot of different people, just kind of getting a slice of life and a breadth of information about what different divisions in the Army and Navy were doing, kind of the history of women in code. I would love to see a Hidden Figures type movie about this. I think that this and The Imitation Game were like the perfect 1-2 punch, and now I'm like, yeah, code! Next was Miyazaki World by Susan Napier. As soon as this book was announced, I knew that I had to buy it because I've been looking for essays about Ghibli films, and this is exactly what that was. I really enjoyed it. It really made me rethink some of the things about Ghibli films, even Ghibli films that I don't like as much as others in his canon, like The Wind Rises. I appreciated more after reading this book of essays, and it was also a great kind of primer on Miyazaki's life and biography. I thought that some of the essays went a little too psychoanalyze-y, where it was like, well, Miyazaki probably made this female character because of his issues with his mom. It's like, okay, like maybe calm that down a little bit, but otherwise it was really good. I'm really glad I bought a copy of it. The next book that I read was Once Ghosted, Twice Shy by Alyssa Cole. This is a novella in her Reluctant Royals series. It follows two black women-loving women falling in love and then out of love and then back in love again, as you do. I wish it were way longer, but it was really cute and fluffy, and as my first Alyssa Cole novella, I'm now hooked, and I will be talking about more books I've read by her later down the line. I didn't think that I was going to like a contemporary romance. She references things like Instagram and gay dating apps, and it really made me feel like connected to this world. And sometimes I don't like that in contemporary, but I think Alyssa Cole somehow pulls it off really well. Next was another romance novel, The Wicked and the Wildflower by Sarah MacLean. I had high hopes for Sarah MacLean because I heard that her writing style was really good, and while it was, I think I'm really tired of straight white romance novels. So this one kind of dragged on, and I feel like the plot always goes by the wayside in romance novels, and you're like, isn't there like something really terrible going on in your lives right now, and they're just like all over each other? It's like, get a hold of yourselves. So I almost DNF'd it, but I went on through. I mean, Sarah MacLean's writing is really good. I think she is of a higher caliber than a lot of other romance novels. Not to throw other romance writers under the bus, I can really tell she has a lot of craft. I just didn't care for the plot or the characters very much. Next was The King of Italia by Megan Whalen Turner. I made a 60-minute video about this series, so I'll just link that and you can watch that. Yeah, Italia series, it's great. Next was Washington Black by Essie Adjugan. This was a kind of coming-of-age novel about a young slave who is living in Barbados when he is rescued, for lack of a better term, by his master's brother, and it becomes this sort of coming-of-age adventure story. It also reminded me a lot of Candide by Voltaire, where characters are like going all over the world and you think people are dead, but then they turn up alive like 100 pages later, spoilers. But it also really made me think about the white savior narrative and the relationship between Titch, the inventor, and the main character and point of view character, Washington. I mean, I've talked before about how I really love like a mentor-mentee dynamic, and I thought theirs was really good, but I think what made me think in this book was Washington really resented Titch for feeling like he was kind of treating him like, oh, I saved you, and like I'm just doing this for the cause of abolition and not because I personally care about you. It hit all the sweet spots of adventure book for me while also making me think. The steampunk elements are played up a lot in this novel, but don't go into it expecting a steampunk adventure because it's not that. It's much more a black coming-of-age story. So the next novel I read was what I consider a volume of giant days by John Allison, Max Sarin, and Alison Kogar. This is one of my absolute favorite comics, and it just follows 5 British university students as they go about their day-to-day lives. It's a perfect slice of life comic, and it's just really cute. This is just a really realistic, funny, lovely comic book series, and I'm on issue 46 now, so I've been following this for a few years. Next up is the other series that I've been following for a few years now, Lumberjanes, by Shannon Waters, Kat Lay, and several other artists. I also consider this to be a volume, and in these, they were fighting an evil statue that came back to life, and Jen's birthday. I really love this series as someone who went to Girl Scout camp and was a camp counselor, and who loves Greek mythology. This is just a lovely all-ages comic. Next, I read The Queen of Italia by Megan Whalen Turner. I also discussed that in my Queen's Thief video review. Next up was another comic book volume. This was Squirrel Girl Volume 6 with the lovely title of Who Run the World? Squirrels. And that's by Ryan North and Erica Henderson, the Dream Team. For my 13th book, I listened to A Conspiracy of Kings by Megan Whalen Turner, the 4th book in the Queen's Thief series, also in my review. Then I read 4 Ways to Forgiveness by Ursula K. Le Guin. This was a sort of short story collection, but they're all stories based on the same theme and set on the same planet, just around different times. It's one of Le Guin's more anthropological short story collections. It's about these 2 planets, and it was about slavery and a war against slavery and the fallout of the ending of slavery. I didn't like all of the stories. I mean, Le Guin's anthropological stuff can be kind of hit or miss for me, but I love her enough to admit that I don't like everything she writes, but it's just another one to cross off my Le Guin list because I'm trying to read all of her books. I didn't love it, but you know, I didn't DNF it, and I DNF'd a lot of books this month. Book 15 was The Thief by Megan Whalen Turner. I listened to it on audio, but I just bought this from the store. I'm trying to buy all the Queen's Thief books. I also talked about this in my Queen's Thief review. Then I read Thick as Thieves by Megan Whalen Turner. I read that one on ebook, also in my Queen's Thief review. End of the series, done, okay. Now, as soon as I finished this, I fell into a horrible, terrible book hangover where nothing mattered anymore. I couldn't find anything I wanted to read. I was kind of miserable for a few days. So I read Squirrel Girl Volume 8, My Best Friend's Squirrel. This might have been the space one. Yeah, anyway, it was good. Squirrel Girl, great. I'm glad to be caught up. Then I thought maybe I'd branch out into some poetry. I'm trying to read a lot of genres this year, so I read The Wilderness by Sandra Lim. It was fine. It had 4 sections. They were all poems loosely about different seasons, and there was a lot of interweaving themes. I can't adequately analyze poetry. I'm just like, yeah, that sounded pretty. So yeah, Sandra Lim. Round about this time of the month is when I discovered that I can now read on the bus if I sit in my special seat. It's kind of weird, but there you have it. I next read The Widows of Malabar Hill by Sutya Masi. This was such a good book. It's a mystery novel set in 1920s India, and the main character is India's first female lawyer. It's fictional, but she's based on a few actual Indian women. It was wonderful. So it follows a woman named Perveen Mystery. She's a really loving, supporting family, and her father is really proud to have her working alongside him in his law firm, which was just great to see a really supportive Indian family. It also flashes back to Perveen's time as a young wife and kind of how her relationship went astray. And then in the present timeline, she's working on the case of 3 Muslim widows of a man who's recently died, and they are trying to figure out sort of their inheritance and the donations that they're going to make, and she is able to speak to them uniquely as a female lawyer instead of one who has to talk to them through a grill in their house that is the way that they communicate with men they're not married to. And I learned so much about Indian culture and the different religions at work in India at the time, and it was really good, and I'm excited to read more about her. Then I read Squirrel Girl Volume 8, My Best Friend's Squirrel. I love all these titles. In this one, Nancy and Doreen go to the Savage Land and they fight Dinosaur Ultron. It was really fun. Side note, this isn't about a particular volume, just kind of in general. Nancy and Doreen are so gay for each other, and like Marvel just won't let them be together. Next, I read Hard Words by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is another book of poetry. I was really excited to pick up Ursula Le Guin's poetry because she has such a way with language, and I knew that she'd be a really good poet. And I enjoyed this a lot more than other poetry volumes, and a lot of the poems are fairly short, but she just has this beautiful turn of phrase. So yes, another one crossed off the list, but I'm looking forward to reading more poetry by her. And my 22nd and last book of the month was In an Absent Dream by Seanan McGuire. This is the 4th novella in the Wayward Children series, and it follows Catherine Lundy, who is a character in the first book, and it's her story of her finding her door. So the Wayward Children series is about children who come back from portal worlds. There's kind of a subgenre within fantasy that's portal fantasy, so like Narnia or Alice in Wonderland, where the kids go through a door and end up in a magical world. Secrets of Droon, if you remember that. Oh, that's a flashback to elementary school. The novellas are short, like, I get that. I almost always wish they were longer. I feel like there could have been an entire book with these ideas. But also then you get this really amazing distilled theme that kind of packs a big punch in a small package, and I think the best novellas are kind of like that. They're not overcrowded with ideas, and they have as much emotion as a novel in far fewer pages, so I think the best authors, like Seanan McGuire, really make a novella worth your while. One of the themes in this book was kind of one that I've been wondering about as I've followed this series is what is the impact on the families of these children that go away to another world and don't want to come back. And this book really answered that question for me, and like almost to like move me to tears, because I wouldn't want to go away to a fantasy world and leave my family behind. I don't think that, given the choice, I would walk through a door. I think that one of the most important things I realized while reading Every Heart a Doorway was that, as opposed to when I was a child, I don't want to leave this world anymore. I want to stay here and I want to live my life here. And I don't think that the other three books kind of considered that as a possibility, but this one plays with that idea a lot more. And Lundy's relationship with her family, it makes you realize kind of how selfish children can be in saying like, oh, I want to go live in the Shire or Harry Potter's world, and not really considering kind of, you know, how that would feel to be away from her family for so long. Alright, I've got a really exciting project coming up. So February here in the States, and I think in Canada, is Black History Month. The shortest month of the year. I'm salty. So I am trying to read as many Black authors as I can. I'll be reading a few non-Black authors just because I have some books out from the library and all that. But I've already started. I told you Alyssa Cole was coming back. I read A Duke by Default, which is a novel in the Reluctant Royals series. Also super fun. I didn't want to stop reading it, and then it ended on kind of a cliffhanger. Not everything was resolved, so hope that gets resolved in future books in the series. Right now, I am reading An Extraordinary Union, also by Alyssa Cole. This is a Civil War era romance with a Black free woman pretending to be a slave. She's a spy for the Union. She has an eidetic memory, and then she falls in love with a white man who is a Pinkerton agent. He's also a spy for the Union. And it's really, really tense. Also, guess what I bought this weekend? It's so much more beautiful in person than I expected. Probably one of the prettiest covers I've ever seen. I wasn't sure how well the monochrome would work for me, and I was kind of on the fence about whether or not to buy this book, but yes. Good. So, I've got to get through this. But, Black History Month. So I'm not just reading books about Black history, I'm just kind of reading as many books by Black authors as I can. And I'm going to be doing a wrap-up about this project at the end of the month. So I'm going to be reading How Long Till Black Future Month by N.K. Jemisin, Binti The Night Masquerade by Nydia Okorafor, Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, Citizen by Claudia Rankine, and March by John Lewis, Andrew Aiden, and Nate Powell. And those are just the ones that I have on hand. I've got several more on my Kindle, ones I'm waiting in the library for. I want to read Becoming this month, but unless I buy a copy of it, it's not going to come in from the library for like another year. If you like this video, you want to see more content by me, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.